question for everyone. And you can take turns answering as you wish, but given the enormity of the danger that you have described, it is especially disturbing that leaders, the media, and the public in general do not seem to be paying significant attention to this issue. Now, how do you propose that we can change that? Perhaps, Izumi, we'll start with you. We just need you to unmute, Izumi.
Yes, sorry.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, no, thank you very much for that very important question. You know, I think raising awareness and, of course, interest is critical. And there are two things important for that. I mean, the first is, of course, getting the message right. And of course, the second, in order for us to be able to start changing the situation, we need to make sure that we deliver the message through the right channels. Now, on the message, I think it's very clear. You know, it's a very dangerous time that we're living in, and of course, the catastrophic consequences. But of course, you know, with all these other global challenges, it is becoming a very crowded field in terms of catching people's attention. What we need to do, in our view, is of course that nuclear weapon issues are one of the two existential threats, along with, of course, the climate change, and we need to make sure that existential part is clearly understood. You know, we have to continue to, you know, stress the horrific consequences. But as I mentioned a little bit in my initial remark, I think we need to make sure that people understand security cannot be ensured only by military. And in fact, disarmament has always been an important tool for security. And I emphasize this simply because I hear all these arguments, but the threats are increasing, the security situation is deteriorating. This is not a time for disarmament. But my message is that it's precisely because of that, disarmament really is important, because it helps to increase our security. And all of these, I think, comes down to education. We need to make sure that people are, you know, fed with accurate information, and understanding will be increased through that. And also to reframe the debate away from a technical jargon. And then, you know, this gets to the hearts of people in terms of, you know, what they really have to take an ownership. So that, I think, will be a very important start. And for that, I think we need to use the evidence and data that we have, you know, the number of these weapons, their power, and the catastrophic consequences, all of that. But of course, as you said, Ruth, the amount of money being spent on these, and of course, the historical, you know, facts about, you know, near use of this weapon. We have prevented, luckily, you know, some of those near misses being a real use of nuclear weapons. But I mean, all these things have to be really, you know, emphasized so that people understand it. And then from there, we can start to discuss how we will be able to start our actions at, you know, each and every corner of the globe. My final word, the reason why I think today's event is so important is that, you know, in a time of so much information from perhaps not so trusted sources, Rotary clubs, I know they exist throughout the world in you know, all sorts of cities and all sorts of people participating in it. And therefore, it is one of the most trusted sources of information, and also trusted places for people to come together and discuss. So I think those are the initial but extremely important step for us to start changing the current situation.
Fantastic, thank you. I completely agree. I think reframing this as something we do for security instead of undermining security is critically important. And I'm so grateful that we have the entire network of Rotary who are coming online to be part of this this journey with us. Vice President Carbonnier, what say you? How do we increase attention to this important issue in the general public?
Well, Ruth, I think there are several ways we can do that, and I'd like just to mention three. But first of all, I would just like to echo what Peter Maurer said in terms of commending you, all the organizers, for this initiative, and say that Peter Maurer unfortunately cannot be with us, but I'm very glad to join you and together with President Mehta and Under Secretary General Nakamitsu for this very important conversation. So what can we do? I think first, to give concrete ways, it's important to keep the memory of the survivors of Hiroshima and alive. And really, I think when we look at what the Hibakusha went through and when they share their experience and suffering, but also the courage and the determination they have shown since then, I think this has been major drivers towards the discussion on nuclear disarmament today. And if you allow a personal testimony here, I had the chance to work and travel in Japan back as a student in the 1980s. And in Hiroshima, I was invited by a Hibakusha to stay at her place with her family. And she told me with the incredible humility about what she went through in August 1945, as she was 8. And she also told me that 10 years later, well, she could go to the US for reconstructive surgery, and how she then sought to go about with her life. And with hindsight, I think that this really forged my own perspective on nuclear weapons. And I could share 2 years ago this perspective with my own children when we visited Hiroshima and the memorial, as you, Shekhar, you did very, very recently. And I think engaging, and this is the second thing we can do, engaging youth is key. And it's rejoicing to see that youth is probably more aware than we might think. We did a recent survey with the ICRC called on Millennials at War. And we interviewed 16,000 millennials in 16 countries. And a majority of them are very concerned that a nuclear attack is likely to occur in the next decade. And what is more, 84% of them think that using nuclear weapon can never be an acceptable option. So I think we see this mobilization, but we need to get them even more engaged. And thirdly, I think we can conduct a bit more research on some open questions to really highlight the disproportionate impact of nuclear weapons and nuclear radiation on women and girls, on the long-term and the intergenerational impact of nuclear weapons, and finally, the impact of nuclear tests on affected communities. So of course, we, international organizations, NGOs, we have a key role to play, but of course, states have a major responsibility. And as Peter Maurer mentioned, but also others, we have very important milestones in the coming months with the review conference of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty that must come into force, and the urgent risk reduction measures that must be taken, and of course, the implementation of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. But as you mentioned, Ruth, more awareness of the general public is key so that states move ahead.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I'm particularly grateful for your emphasis on the youth and recognizing that they have an awareness that we might not always recognize. Within our own movement, we know the strength of our medical student work is one of our richest, greatest strengths, and we're particularly proud to be partnering with the IFMSA for this event today. So I very much share your views that our answers are in front of us and amongst us, but we have to listen and engage in ways that we perhaps haven't done very well in the past. President Mehta, now over to you. How do you think we can get the general public to pay more attention to this critical issue?
So the answer lies in the question itself. We need to get to the public. It's extremely important. And I think the earlier in life they start learning about peace, faith, hope, tolerance, it's better for humanity. Young children need to start believing that war is not fruitful, that people need to understand each other, that people are different and they have to be tolerant to each other. And the earlier they start learning it, the better it is. Rotary fortunately works with tens of thousands of schools across the globe because we have interact clubs in schools. Apart from that, we work with young people. We have a youth wing where we have a few 100,000 members. And when you tell a story to a person, you tell it to a family. So that number is multiplied. It's important that we share with them not only the goodness of peace, but also tell them and show them, if possible, the horrific stories of a nuclear blast. While I was able to go, and Giles, you and Nakamitsu have been able to go and see that museum, but that those visuals need to be shared with younger people to understand what harm it can do to humanity. It's unbelievable. I mean, people became like candles there. They just dropped, their bodies dropped like this. So I think it's very important that we show them the horrific side of it and also tell them this can be avoided by peace. Once they start understanding the concept of peace, if I start believing in peace, and I come from the country where Gandhi had come from, he believed so much in peace and non-violence that he could ultimately reach there. And I'm sure when young people, and youth has tremendous power. If they start understanding that this is something that is extremely important for the future of mankind itself, I think we would have made a big difference.
Thank you. I'm reminded that when we hear the message from the witnesses of the actual use of nuclear weapons from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the one thing that we all must agree on is that nuclear weapons can never be used again. So how do we work together to bring that about?